Simi, what are your thoughts on school not teaching you the things that students need for the real world? Listen, we always hear, like literally this has been a thing that I've been hearing since I was, you know, in primary school. It's not new. This whole idea of, man, school doesn't prepare us for the real world. Why don't they teach us about taxes? Why don't they teach us about this, that, and the other? And it's like, yeah, I mean, it is true that the school system is, you know, based on the very old idea of creating factory workers, right? And so the curriculum is designed around getting people to follow orders and do this and do that, and not necessarily developing independent skills. Although there are lessons in school and subjects that are taught which are about personal development. For example, personal development, the subject, which was something taught in my school from primary school up, which is all about interpersonal skills, all about more social topics, more nuanced things that can't be written in a textbook, but that you have to have conversations and experience in order to gain that knowledge, right? But for me, whenever I hear this whole thing of why don't they teach us this in schools, it's like, I just think, bro, would you even pay attention anyway? You're already not paying attention to the stuff they are teaching you. The whole idea that a school is responsible for teaching you everything you would need to know going into the real world, I don't agree with, actually. I think there are some things that it's fine for you to learn outside of school. If I go to the, you know, example of taxes, right? So I always heard that. How come they don't teach us about taxes in school? Why don't they teach us this? Why don't they teach us this? And, you know, I also thought myself, why don't they teach us it? And then I just like Googled it and I'm like, oh, like you can learn it. You can learn about taxes and how taxes work in like a good hour if you're like actually paying attention. Why would that be a subject in school? You know what I mean? Like, why would that be a subject in school? I don't really get that. It's like so easy to just read up on it. So another thing you'll hear, and you know, this is probably coming from the more, I don't know, Jake Paul types of the world, because I specifically remember he released a song which is all about, they didn't teach us in school how to be a millionaire on YouTube and all that. And it's like, how is a school supposed to teach you that? That's like entrepreneurial skill. And schools can develop that. I mean, there are many programs in my school. Maybe I'm lucky the school I went to, but they did do things to encourage the entrepreneurial spirit. But there are certain things where it's like, you know, people want a school to teach them exactly what they need to know to be like successful. And that's kind of not what a school is meant for, at least the, you know, childhood schools. So we're talking, you know, primary or nursery through to like, you know, when you're 18 years old. I mean, it's meant to be a place where you can go as a kid to develop interpersonal skills. That is important, which is why I think it is cool to be able to go to a class and interact with other kids, even though it can be a nightmare a lot of the time. It is important. You learn the basics, you know, the basics of English or whatever language or whatever country you're from, you know, the standard language of that country. Language, let's just say freaking language. Mathematics, basic arithmetic is important to know. You know, the example of what if you're paying for something at a shop and you get ripped off with the change. You know, basic example, but that's important. Knowing the basics of how the world works, you know, so the basic stuff in science. I just think there's a lot of stuff which, you know, I'm never going to use this in real life, but it is still important to know because it's all about giving you a base knowledge so that you can kind of go into the world somewhat informed, you know? Obviously, you're not going to know everything and you're never going to learn everything, and there's so much out there to learn, but I think that basic knowledge is something that schools, whether they do a good job or not of instilling it into people, it's a good target for a school to have. I don't know, I'm guessing, if anybody said this before I arrived, but I don't understand why schools don't teach us how to pay taxes. Dude, perfect. I literally was saying that just before. Let me go into more detail, right? Let me go into more detail. How to pay taxes. So, if you are a salaried employee, you never have to worry about paying taxes because your taxes are automatically deducted from your paycheck, right? So for most people, or I don't know what the percentage of employed to self-employed is in, you know, average in the UK, for example, but I would say it's fair to say most people are employed, right? So for most people, taxes is something you never actually have to worry about from a technical standpoint. It's probably good to understand the tax bracket you're in so that you know how much money you're paying to the government to fund, hopefully, to fund, you know, your community. But for most people, that's not something you need to do, right? If you're self-employed, that's when it becomes important to actually know how to calculate your taxes and all that. But I'm not gonna say it's like really complicated to the point where you can't do it, but for most people, it's probably more worth it to get an accountant to help them sort out their taxes, especially if it's business taxes and not just personal taxes, right? It's more beneficial, more time efficient to pay someone to do that, so you can spend the rest of your time focusing on the stuff you need to develop your business or your self-employment trade or whatever you're doing. I mean, maybe this is short-sighted of me to say and someone else can refute this, but I don't think it's necessary for it to be taught in school. If you really want to learn about it, it's a Google search away, you know? It's not really something that people need to be taught in school as part of the curriculum. Chad's work without a contract. Let's freaking go. I do not promote tax evasion. Me saying let's freaking go was merely an expression of excitement at the, the activity in my chat, and not an endorsement of any particular illegal doings. Such as saying, I mean, I won't need fractions or algebra in the real world. Like, come on, do we need that stuff? The school teaches you stuff about poetry and stuff, but why do we need to know that? Okay. What do you mean you won't need fractions in real life? Dude, how do you not need fractions? Understanding how fractions work is just like fundamental to thinking. Like, come on, dude. Like, what? It's just fundamental to thinking. Just being able to quickly understand something in fractional terms. So I'm not gonna even address that one. Well, I guess I already did, but okay. Algebra in the real world. Algebra is good for being able to model situations in your mind quickly, you know? But let's say, okay, how many situations are there for the average person who's not an engineer, mathematician, computer scientist that they would need algebra? Not many situations. Okay, does that mean it's unnecessary for it to be taught? I don't think so. Algebra is like such a basic facet of mathematics. Like the stuff of mathematics that's really so high up there that you're just like, why does anyone need to know this? That's what mathematicians do. Mathematicians aren't doing algebra. You know what I mean? Like algebra is so base level. It's as important as 1, 2, 3, to be honest. So algebra is another thing where it's like, you should just understand how to do it, even if you're not using it. Just understand how to do it, you know? Otherwise, it might be really easy for someone to pull the wool over your eyes if you don't have a basic understanding of how numbers work. Okay, you said teaching you stuff about poetry. All right, poetry class, English literature, that's all about being able to interpret and critically analyze text, right? And it's not even exclusive to text. Sometimes we would watch films in my English class and we'd analyze that too. You know, it's all about being able to understand deeper meanings. And, you know, that's, in my opinion, one of the most important subjects because it allows you to enjoy art on a whole other level, not just on the surface level, but on the more subliminal level to understand, wait, what was the author, creator, director, whoever trying to convey with this beyond literally what is being conveyed on the screen or on the page? I mean, of all the subjects, I'm like, English is so... That's like one of the only subjects that is like trying to make your life more enjoyable, not just trying to make your life easier. You know what I mean? Like, let me show you how to enjoy a book. Now, granted, reading a book for school is not fun, but the skills you learn from English, and I'd also say from history as well, because it's a lot of the same skills, become really helpful. I mean, if, you know, I was in a school giving a speech, and a student asked me, no, it wasn't a student, it was one of the teachers. They asked a question to kind of like, you know, you'll understand what I say. The question they asked is, what school subjects would you say helped you best in your career as a YouTuber? You know, it's one of those questions to get the kids like, oh, school is great. School is great though. And, you know, I said English and history, right? Because they developed my ability to analyze and to creatively express myself, and I feel like those were important. Couldn't you argue that algebra is literally just 1 + x = 2, so realistically algebra is so broad it can't be useless? I mean, that's essentially what I was saying. Yeah, that, you know, it's just a way of modeling problems, so I think it is just something to know, you know. Simi, if you don't stop, I'll get an existential crisis. Stranica, how is this gonna give you an existential crisis? I feel like this gives you a solid basis to know that the stuff you've been studying in school isn't useless, that you haven't been wasting your time, that it was actually important. And on that note, another thing that school teaches you to do. Now, granted, the way people learn in school is not optimized to different learning styles. It's not optimized to different learning difficulties people have. You know, a lot of times people with ADHD get completely misunderstood as just disruptive, unfocused, and, you know, unserious, when really they just have something which makes it harder. And there's like an array of things like that, which mean that the school setting is not optimized for a hell of a lot of people, and they end up being seen as bad students when really they're just people who need other resources in order to succeed just as well as students without those obstacles. But anyway, I will say that one thing that school is really good at is giving you a focus. It's so important in life to actually have a focus, and especially when you're a young kid and no one is relying on you for anything. You know, when you're a young kid, you don't have responsibility, typically speaking, right? But school is that focus where you can actually have a goal and something to achieve, and that's really important. And it's something you might not realize until you're out of school, and then you're like, oh crap, what do I do? So yeah, that's another reason school is important. Simi is a nerd. This has been established like years ago. This was established from the time I was 4 years old. To be honest, Simi, I can't lie. You just search anything on Google and you can get the answer. That's not true. That's not true. You can get answers to questions, but how do you know what questions to ask? How do you know how to interpret the answers that Google gives you? How do you know when Google's giving you an answer that's BS? Because that happens. You Google something, you get results, and it's like, this is rubbish. How would you know? How would you know if you haven't developed your critical thinking skills? Exams should be optimized for everyone, or school should give you your grade on your understanding and how you work in a specific subject. Also, exams shouldn't be the only thing your grade is given to you by, because let's be honest, people could just be full of pressure. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, testing a bunch of people who are all different on one very narrow criteria is always going to be tough, and there are going to be people who suffer as a result. I'm not, you know, I feel like you have to really study education as a subject to really come up with like the ideal solution, and then you have to have a degree of power to kind of implement that in your country, right? I don't really know what the solution is. But yeah, I do agree that it's definitely not optimized for everybody. And it's hard to, you know, you can't optimize for everybody. That's, you know, that's kind of against what the word optimization means, but it's not suited to everybody, I should say. Jim Jamer plays, what's up, saying time ago, were you that kid who was happy at school, but when you get home, you're a bit sad? I mean, school was like a nice setting for me. I liked school. I liked, you know, I did well in school, and so I liked the feeling of achievement I got from being at school. I didn't dislike being home. I liked being home. But I also liked being at school. And yeah, I had quite like a noisy household and quite, you know, it was quite tiresome. So sometimes school was actually a break from being at home for me as well. And that's how it is for a lot of people that go to school. You know, it doesn't mean you don't like being at home, but having that change in environment is always helpful. So yeah, I would say so. I would say so. How does it feel to not have that feeling of achievement anymore? Thank you, Kevin. This freaking guy.